Good morning. Good morning, Stephanie. Any thoughts for today? Yes, many thoughts for today to share with you. This is Tobias, and I have the crew gathered here to give you the rundown on the uptown version of reality, because the uptown version of reality is the one that says, well, we look at the data and not just what's happening on our street to determine what's going on with the world. Because unfortunately, the trajectory of the Earth is to unveil a lot of destructive energy on the ones who cannot understand the relativity of life, you see. They can't understand that there is an up and there is a down, and that for every up there is a down, for every right there is a left, and for every left there is someone moving forward, because the place you left behind is in your rearview mirror and not in the windshield, you see? So you got to look through the windshield and not at the place you left behind, right? Right. However, you can pay attention to the mile markers, right? And say, well, we seem to be going this way, so let's pay attention to the mile markers. And even though we're in the desert now, doesn't mean we won't come to the mountains eventually if we keep going this way. So if we want to stay in the desert, we can stay in the desert. And if we want to go to the mountains, we can go to the mountains. Or if we want to go to the seashore, we can go to the seashore. It all depends upon having a map in hand. And the map in hand is the one that tells us which way we need to turn to go where we want to go, right? That's exactly so, Tobias. If you are, if you don't have a map, of course, and you don't understand relativity, of course, then you would think everything was the desert. And we've talked about that. That if you live in the desert, you never went anywhere else, you had no way of knowing anything else. Someone comes to you and says, hey, I've been to the ocean, this vast thing of water. You would not believe them. You would think they were crazy or just playing with you or whatever, right? Yes, because they have a very limited point of view. So the more expanded you get in your point of view, the more the map begins to take shape, you see. And so for you, you have a map and you have us to work with you, because you don't just say, hey, everything in the world is the same as it is on my street. If everything in the world were the same as it were on your street, Stephanie, it would be a fine world, wouldn't it? It would be a very fine world, Tobias. I'm not sure it isn't a fine world, but it's going to be, when I read the news and I listen to the climate scientists and stuff, I see that there's a lot that's not happening on my street. It's not happening on Mulberry Street today, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And maybe in the parade, eventually, all of those things will come to Mulberry Street. But in the meantime, I talk to you guys to get your point of view, because you're kind of like the climate scientists. You have a more expansive point of view. You can explain to me, if people don't trust on the moon landing, um, because for whatever reason, there's nobody like that on their street, then, it looks pretty flat on their street, then they have a very limited point of view. Most people are trained from grade school on to trust that the earth is round and the moon circles the earth, etc. Yes. So most people are trained that way, and they adapt to it, and they say, well, it looks flat, but it's really a round world. However, they don't think about it. They don't think about it. They just regurgitate it. And they don't say, hey, maybe there's more out there than meets the eye on Mulberry Street. And so they can't handle the changes coming to the earth because they don't see it on their street. Just like the woman who made a comment under the dual pictures that someone displayed in a North Dakota page about a street view. And the earlier picture didn't show much as far as greenery because it was North Dakota. And North Dakota didn't have many trees. It was a plain state. But since then, in the last 100 years, many trees have been planted and grown. And now the street is all green with the overhanging branches of the trees. And she said, well, this disproves climate change. All those stupid wackos who think that deforestation is a problem or that the climate is changing haven't got a clue, because she didn't have a clue. So if you don't have a clue, you think everybody else is crazy if they say something that doesn't match what you see, right? Right. So she was very limited, I would say. I call it flexibility. The elasticity is what I call it. The elasticity of the mind. So those people who have very little elasticity, they are very rigid in their thinking, can't stretch their minds enough. And so that includes a lot of people who think they're pretty smart, like mathematicians. And just talking to a guy who apparently teaches math, and he just could not get his head around the fact that I could talk to Bernard Riemann, right? So he has a very limited elasticity to his ability to understand reality, even though he probably thinks he's pretty smart. Yes, that is true. A lot of people who do well in the current system of education think that they're pretty intelligent, you see, whereas they have, as you say, a very limited ability to expand their minds into new dimensional realities because they don't understand relativity. And so Mr. Riemann, of course, who is here, has a great deal of elasticity, and so he can expand his mentality, you might say, in order to understand the coherence in the universe. It's very clear to him. Relativity is very clear to him, that everything is relative in the umbrella of the God energy, that there has to be a starting point at which you begin to interpret your experience, you see. Yes, and I have a starting point that's very profound, I think, and it works for me. It's always worked. It's always held up to whatever the evidence is. Yes, it holds up to the evidence. You haven't found any evidence yet that would say that this is not true. And you look for the evidence. You don't just sit on your hands and say, well, I got it all figured out. You keep looking at everything and saying, well, how does this piece fit? Does it undermine the platform or does it rest solidly upon it? And so far, everything rests solidly upon it, right? Yes, everything. Everything. Every scientific thing I read or whatever, it fits solidly on this platform. I may not understand all of it, but it doesn't undermine it. There's a lot of room for expansion on this platform because the platform is so solid. Yes, a lot of room for expansion, which is another way of talking about the elasticity of the mind. And so for those who have elasticity, they're not troubled by the fact that you have experiences that are different than theirs because they understand the underlying platform that will support it, you see. So they're not worried about it. But the people who have limited or rigid points of view cannot expand that much. And so you might say that a lot of humanity had to grow in order to accept the duality, but they cannot accept the Trinity because they have not been able to grow enough to do that. So the bulk of humanity has expanded beyond saying, hey, the world is dictated by what's happening on Mulberry Street, but they still cannot understand that you can be standing on Mulberry Street and see a lot of things that make you say, hey, I wonder what the significance of this is today. How does this work with the total picture? And they can even listen to the news reports of a landslide in Ethiopia or the hottest day ever recorded in modern history. And they can say, well, there's something going on here today. Everything looks pretty good on my street, but why are these strange people driving down Mulberry Street? Because the strange people that are driving down Mulberry Street are the ones that are in the news or on the internet in videos or whatever. So if you see a video of people digging through the mud trying to find those who have been swept away in a mudslide, you say, well, that's very interesting today because there's no mudslide on Mulberry Street, but here's a magic mirror that shows me people digging through the mud, and hundreds of people were killed in that landslide, they say. And so, what's going on today? What's going on today? How is it that there is a fire today that is so ferocious that it is burning down buildings in a town in Canada, even though all the firefighters are working their best to stop it, you see, and they've been working on it for a while. What's going on today? There's no wildfire on Mulberry Street, but the magic window shows me that there is more to this story than meets the eye when I take a stroll down Mulberry Street. And so what's going on? What's going on in the world today? And then they begin to grow because they begin to say, well, even though I live in the desert, enough people have come and told me about the ocean that I'm beginning to think that there might be more than meets the eye. There might be more to life than I could even try to understand all by myself, because my little feet can't take me to the ocean because, you see, I'm just toddling around in the desert because I'm too tired and too old to try to grow and go to the ocean, you see. Here I am in the desert, and that's where I'll stay because I can't figure it out today. I can't figure it out today because my little feet are too small, you see, to take me around the world. And so they won't even bother to understand what's going on in Ethiopia or in Canada. And they will say, well, everything's fine on Mulberry Street today. So all this climate change business is just a lie. It's just a lie. They're just trying to get my money, force me to pay out through the nose so they can get rich, you see. They'll get rich off all my money because I make about $2,000 a month and I pay taxes on it once in a while. I can not avoid it by hiding my income. And they're going to take all my hard-earned money in order to make people rich who lie to me and say, hey, climate change going on today. And then the people who say to you, or think it, as you know, they don't always say it to you, well, that lady is crazy because she says she talked to Bernard Riemann. How silly is that? Therefore, it's not happening in my neighborhood. It's not happening in my house. He's not coming to talk to me in my house. Therefore, it can't be true. It's just a ploy, you see, to get attention. and maybe to get rich. She wants me to give me money give her money so she can get rich, you see, because that's the only reality that I know. The only reality is I know that it's all about me. It's all about me. It's all about me in the desert, you see. And the ones who say, what about humanity? Why isn't it all about humanity? Because you see, I can't exist here on earth as a man or woman if it were not for God's trust on humanity. And so they are the ones who will be swallowed in the rising sea, and their stories will come to an end, you see. Their stories will just come to an end because they couldn't grow. They could not find a trust on expansive reality, expanding their world in a way that would say, it's not all about me. It's not all about me. Because the ego, of course, says it's all about me. It's all about me. It's all about what I can get out of this world. It's not about the Trinity. So, why am I saying this, you ask? I am asking that, Tobias. Why are you saying this? Because we already know that the people who don't have the elasticity to understand that this story of how you're talking to me still trust on the internet, still trust that they can sit in their living room and talk to someone on the other side of the world, and only because it's in their living room, right? They don't even understand how it works, and they don't care. That is correct. They don't understand how it works, and they don't care. And so they don't understand how you and we work because they don't care. They don't care to find out. However, as you say, a new reality or a new nation under God can start with three. And start with three people who care about humanity. Start with three people who trust on God, you see, who say, well, we can't keep playing in the same old way because it isn't working, people. It isn't working because you have the elasticity to encompass relativity. And you can see that the number one, the number two, and the number three are all part of the trust on a basic pattern of reality. And so you have to find the pattern of reality, right? I would say so. Every day it's about a pattern. But for some people, the patterns are only very, very elementary mathematics. 1 + 1 = 3 in their mind, or 2 + 2 = 5. And they can't figure out why it doesn't come out right. The equation doesn't come out right. So they give it up. They just give it up. And they say it doesn't come out right. It doesn't come out right. That is correct because they can't understand the Trinity. And so they get it wrong, but they can't figure it out. So they just give up. They just give up and they say, well, I've reached the limits of my ability to think for myself. And so I'll just let it be. I'll just let it be because there's no reality outside of 1 + 1 = 3 or 2 + 2 = 5, whatever it may be. And so they can't even count on their fingers, you see, because their fingers are irrelevant to the view of Mulberry Street, right? And so now let's go forward a bit and see what's coming to the earth today. Okay, I'm good with that to see. And I understand that there's elasticity in that too, that because of the nature of reality, the platform on which I rely, it's a feedback loop all the time. The story is always developing. It's not always the same because there's always a mix-up of human consciousness and the physical realm, you might say, is always a mix-up because of the Trinity with God energy, the perceptions, reactions, etc. Yes. So if you don't understand the Trinity, you can't understand how it works. And you think the future is either completely unpredictable, or you think it is very solid in its predictability. Of course, the scientists don't say that. They say, based on what we see that there's a lot of dark energy, although they don't say it in that way. But they say what we see is that if this doesn't change, then there's going to be a devastating impact on the earth, right? Yes, they do say that. And they also say if we change today, it might delay some of these effects, or some of them might not even happen if we change the way we play. So they see a connection between the way we play today and what will happen tomorrow. So they at least have the elasticity to understand that there is a deep connection between the way humans play and the way their world unfurls, right? Yes, I do see that. They do see that. And the problem is that they do not understand that there is another element, at least for the most part, they do not understand this, that is at play here. It's not just whether we stop throwing more fumes into the atmosphere that will continue to cause global warming, you see. It is like saying that they understand the symptoms and the connection between the symptoms and the mechanism of the disease, but they do not comprehend the nature of the disease. They do not comprehend what is causing humans to behave the way they can behave. They have theories and they have ideas. If this happens, people will always behave like this, etc. But they do not have the ability to penetrate it all deep enough to see that it's exactly the way it needs to be because of the relativity of love energy. That there always has to be a balance between the lover and the beloved, you see. There always has to be a balance between those who give and those who receive. And therefore, in order to receive, you have to give, because you have to switch places all the time. Because that's the nature of relativity, that you are able to see it from two different sides, you see, and still know that the ability to go from one side to the other indicates that there is something else at play here. In other words, if you can stand on Mulberry Street and still think about the landslide in Ethiopia, then you get two different points of view. And so your ability to conceive of a reality that is different from your view on Mulberry Street is the ability to be conscious of something that allows you to get those two different points of view. What it is that allows you to get those two different points of view, because one is very physical, right? And one is very, what we would call intellectual. But it is not something you can weigh or measure in the way that you can measure the number of people who say, hey, we vote for this president today, or we vote for that president today, or we vote for that person to be president today. It is the lack of ability to understand what holds together the physical and the, we'll call it imaginary realms that defies explanation for them. They can't figure it out. They just cannot figure out the Trinity. That there has to be something that holds them together, you see. And that is the failure of the ability of the elasticity of consciousness to encompass a triple point of view, you might say. They can't encompass a triple point of view. They can understand a point of view that would say, if I were out in space and looking at the Earth, it would look round. But here on Mulberry Street, it looks pretty flat. So their minds can encompass that. However, the gap in their ability to grow, you see, is that they can't comprehend what holds the two together. What holds the view on Mulberry Street, together with the view from the space station together, so that both of them can exist at the same time. Of course, time is a little slippery concept, and they can think about that too. However, as you know, it is the third leg of the stool that defies humanity because they can't put it together, you see. And those who get a point of view that allows them to see the Trinity cannot help those who lack the elasticity to understand how the number 3 could save them, you see. They just can't figure it out. And so it's okay. Why are we talking about this today if they can't listen because they lack the elasticity? We're talking about it today with you, Stephanie. We're talking about it with you because you understand it perfectly. And we like to talk to each other about things that we understand in our group, you see, and try to get a different point of view so that we can grow, you see, because we like to grow. We like to know how to live in peace and harmony, which means we have to understand reality. So we like to keep exploring reality. And those who don't like to explore something that is beyond the door will slam the door and say, hey, we can't listen to this today. However, most of the people who understand the reality of God, you see, cannot understand the nature of the relativity that continues to blow their minds, you see. Just continues to blow their minds. And they say, well, this is weird. This is weird today, but I'm listening because it is very interesting to me because I know there's some truth in it. I know there's some truth in it. However, they still do not have the elasticity, but most of them, some of them do, to take the pieces of the puzzle that they were given and figure out how to put them together in a way that will say, hey, you're one of us now. You're one of us now because you have the ability to listen and talk. You don't have to rely on the old-time religion that still confuses you because it doesn't agree with the world you did see when you had your near-death experience or this or that spiritually transformative experience. So you can't figure it out. What are you to do with it? What are you to do with that experience? And the same thing, as you know, with those who are considered schizophrenic, and you know many of them, that they can't figure it out because that old-time religion has clouded their ability to take their new point of view when they hear someone talking to them and interpret it in a way that would play well to their audience. In other words, they can't say, well, God told me this today, because their audience would say, well, you're crazy today, honey, you're crazy today. And so they have to hide away their experiences, you see. It would be like saying that someone goes to the ocean and walks in the ocean, and they come back and say, well, this is what I saw. And the ones in the desert say, you're hallucinating today. You had a hallucination. And now we're going to have to lock you up because you're crazy, you see. And if you think that there's a big body of water out there that you could drown in, then you're dangerous. You're dangerous because you'll try to drown us in the bathtub, you see. You'll try to drown us in a little pool because you think it's an ocean. And so the people who go to the ocean may come back and be forced into a mental asylum or to take medication or whatever to deny their reality. So they have to deny their reality. And that's what's going on with the schizophrenic people. They're having to deny their own reality in order to say, hey, don't lock me away. Don't say I'm crazy. Don't say I'm flawed. Don't hate me. Why won't you just listen to me and help me understand what they're saying to me? And so some of the most gifted people on the face of the earth today are unable to stay in a good way because of the people with the steeple. Because whether you are a psychiatrist today in the mainstream or a witch doctor, you both trust that the people who can communicate with those who are not currently in the physical world are possessed by the devil, you see, because modern psychiatry just substitutes some other words for the devil possession that they think is going on because they can't explain it. And so they just say there's a monster inside of you, there's a monster, there's a devil that's making you hallucinate, you see. And so they destroy their own reality over and over and over again. And so the stupid people, and I'm calling them stupid because they're not listening to this anyway, and we've all been stupid at times, but at least some of us are smart enough to know that we're stupid. And we say, God, I'm stupid. And God says, yes, you are, dear. And I'm pretty stupid too when I can't figure out what to do to help you to gain more elasticity in your thinking, you see, so you can remember me. And then you say, okay, God, thank you. Because I guess I knew that I was talking to you, didn't I? And God will say, yes, you did, dear. Because you called on me. You said, God, I'm stupid. And you were right. And I came to help you see that you could be a little smarter if you would listen to me and not just keep calling on me and then ignoring me. Boy, that's irritating when someone rings your phone and then they hang up before you can talk to them. So the next time you say, God, I made a mistake, then please don't hang up the phone before I can talk to you because I heard you. I heard you say my name and I heard you call on me. And so stop being so stupid, you see. Start being a little smarter and listen to me. And that is the joke on you and me. That sometimes we are so stupid that we are the smartest people in the world. because we unfurled a trust on God, you see. And we can be so stupid that we can say, God, I feel stupid today. Can you help me to understand this? And God will say, of course I can help you to understand this. Thank you for staying on the line because you're a friend of mine and I'm a friend of yours. But when you call on me and you hang up the phone, then I can't help you to figure it out. So just call and say, God, I'm stupid today. And I will say, yes, you are. That is how God will play when you call on God. So when you call on God, be aware that God is listening to you and don't hang up the phone for God's sake. Don't say, oh God, you can't say that to me. I'm schizophrenic, you see. Just say, God, I can't figure this out. And when God says, well, sit down, dear, and listen to me, then don't turn away in fear. Do not turn away in fear. I'm talking to you, the ones that have been designated as schizophrenic. Get over your fear and don't listen to those damn doctors who tell you that you're flawed. You are not flawed. You are just very, very, very confused and very, very fearful of the good news. Because the good news is that the ones who can hear God talk to them, or those in spirit, you see, are not crazy. They just have to understand that they were born into a distant land of the ones who are the crazy ones. And so they have to be crazy in order to fit in, you see. So stop trying to fit in and start waking up and say, I'm not the crazy one. I'm not the crazy one today. And just call on God and say, God, I feel so stupid because I thought I was crazy like them. And God will say, well, thank you for calling me today because I have a lot to say. And if you don't understand what I say, then find somebody who does, like Stephanie. Just call her up and say, Steph, God said this to me today. What does he mean? What does he mean when he said that to me today? I'll give you an example. Steph knows someone who is diagnosed as schizophrenic and has to take medicine so he doesn't hear the voices you see. And Steph said, well, who's talking to you and what did they say? And he said, well, God talks to me. And she said, cool. What does God say? And he said, God tells me I'm going to hell. And she said, I wonder why he would say that to you. And so she went and asked God. She said, God, why would you tell so and so that he's going to hell? And God said, well, because he's asked for it, you see. He asked me to explain to him what's going on with me. And I said, you're going to hell because hell is where you go when you ignore me and you hang up the phone after you ask the question. And every time you ask the question and say, God, what the fuck is the matter with me? I get on the line to talk to you and you slam the phone down and say, I better take more medicine today because God is talking to me. And that's hell, you see. That's hell. And so just turn around and look at me and say, God, I asked you a question and now you're here to answer the question. I should at least listen to you and then we'll be friends again, you see. And we will get along just fine. But as long as you slam down the phone, then I have to keep telling you that that's the backwards view of reality that will take you to hell. It will take you to hell. And so Steph reported to this person what God said, and we haven't heard any more, but she opened up the door for that person to see that God is a reality and not a hallucination. And therefore, just because he can hear the roar of the ocean when he closes his eye, doesn't mean that the ocean doesn't exist, you see. It doesn't mean that he is crazy. If people can't understand that, they are the crazy ones. And so, all you people out there who've been diagnosed with schizophrenia, I suggest that you get a test of your ability to reform your identity by saying, hey, I'm not afraid anymore. You can't make me afraid. You can't make me believe that I am flawed. You can't make me believe that God created me just so you could say that I have a demon inside of me that they have to medicate it out of existence, you see. Even though they know they can't medicate it out of existence, they say you are permanently flawed because I don't hear God talking to me. Therefore, I live in the desert, you see, and I can't trust anyone that comes back from a trip to the ocean and says, hey, there's a big body of water out there because the devil is inside of them, you see. The devil is inside of them. So wake up, people. And if you know someone who has schizophrenia, get a different point of view. Get some elasticity in your own thinking so that you can help them to get some elasticity in theirs. Because the more you expand your point of view, the more they see that you are so stupid that you can't understand reality, the more you will perk up and say, maybe there's more to learn today. Maybe there's more to learn today. Maybe the scientists and the pastors don't even know what the fuck they're talking about. Maybe they haven't got enough elasticity to put the puzzle together today. They can't do the math. They can't do the math because they are defeated by their own lack of ability to escape their rigidity today. And they're trained that way. They're just trained that way. So I can untrain myself enough to see that maybe the people who trained me were the ones who were insane, you see. Well, thank you, Tobias. Thank you for that. You're welcome, dear.